the storm, riders on the storm.
Greetings, fellow diggers. Welcome to Greenbushes Pool, the southwest of Western Australia. The home of many mysterious digging creatures. Now, there's been a lot made about the astrology of the first half of 2025. Got outer planets moving, got eclipses, got retrogrades, a lot of hype. I've even heard very experienced stargazers, not prone to over-dramatics, and people who have track records, who have predicted major things, who've said this could be the most significant period of astrology, or period of transition or disruption, even chaos, in modern human history. Which is a rather big call, isn't it? So let's walk and talk about it. So can astrology predict significant world-shaking events? So there's two examples that I'd start with. One fairly recent was mid-July 2024. We had two of the more unstable planets meeting, Mars and Uranus. Uranus currently being, at that point, perched on one of the most problematic fit stars in the sky clock, Caput Algol, very colourfully described in ancient astrology as the demon star and the head of Medusa, the decapitated head of Medusa, which also happens to be perched on top of the Moonchild, aka the supreme leader of the realm, who is about to be inaugurated, or who has just been inaugurated as I film this. Sorry, hit a spiderweb. Perched on top of his midheaven, so the highest point in the sky when he was born. And there was much doomsaying and red flag waving going on from basically every major politically inclined astrologer. And what happened? We had the non-fatal head wound. Now you can believe whatever you want to believe about that event. The fact is it happened. The fact is that it happened in almost perfect alignment with the sky clock. So that's one. But perhaps more significantly, we had what was called the Great Conjunction of early 2020. It was the meeting of the two planets of death, let's call it that. Saturn and Pluto It was more the context of that meeting. So these planets meet every 40 or so years, I think. This one happened to occur in tropical Capricorn. Happened to occur literally in the first month of the year of clear vision, let's say. It would occur roughly a few weeks after a very major solar eclipse, and would occur in the context of a lot of other celestial activity, including the movements of Jupiter, the greater benefic, the planet which gives everything an extra dose of meaning and significance. Largesse, let's call it that. So as well as Saturn, the Lord of Time, and Pluto, the Lord of the Underworld, meeting, we also had Jupiter, which would conjunct Pluto, and then would conjunct Saturn on the day of the summer, Northern Hemisphere, solstice, at the first degree of tropical Aquarius, the sign of the collective, which Pluto itself would move into in the next few years. It all seemed very significant and heavy and meaningful. What happened? We got a fucking global pandemic and mandated experimental injections and the most obscene, unheard of, unprecedented series of societal restrictions obviously the world has ever seen. So to answer the question, can astrology predict significant world-shaking events? Most obviously yes. So that's our context. That's what we're coming into here. So in this video I'm going to do three things. Firstly, I'm going to do a bit of a comparison between the first half of of 2025, but looking specifically at the time around March, which is eclipse season, and the month before and the month after. It's a bit of a comparison to 2020. See if we can get a general idea about things. I'm going to argue fairly conclusively that we could expect this to be more extreme is the right word, but more confusing, more disruptive, more destabilizing. That things will not be the same to a greater extent after this period of time. Maybe that's the best way to put it. The amount of change that will happen seems just hard to really contemplate if we're going to take the planet seriously, which we are. That's the first part. I'm going to give you some overall themes, overall archetypal themes for March Madness, which may or may not be the storm. Definitely a storm, possibly.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
Then I'm going to walk you through in more detail for part 2 of this, the astrology of 2020 and the pandemic. I'm going to show you that if we take the planets very seriously, from a geocentric perspective, as luminaries making very real geometric patterns in the sky, layered on top of that, the tropical zodiac, we can get a very good grasp on the story that is about to unfold. And so once I do that, once I sort of show you that we can predict and hence prepare based on the movements of the luminaries, I'm then going to walk you through, I'm going to take you through a story or a narrative or a timeline for March Madness for 3 lunar cycles, starting the first day of February and ending at the end of April. I'm not saying this is, going to happen, that I'm like a Nostradamus here, although I do think Nostradamus was very much aware of these times we're about to enter into. What this is going to be is a clear and coherent and wholesome narrative that you can hold on to. Things get fucking wild, particularly in March into April, and every cutard fantasy comes true. We have financial collapses and communications blackouts and governments fall all over the world and 9/11s popping up everywhere across the West. At least you've got this narrative, and you will have a printable PDF March Madness calendar, which you can find if you click on the link in the description and head to my Substack, or I'll try and find a way to do it. You can print it off, you can have it there, you can follow it, play along at home, even if the lights go out, you can take notes. You can sort of record your own experiences of this event and sort of then look back in hindsight and see, you know, did they actually match out? Did they proceed in some sort of alignment, archetypal resonance with this storyline that I've come up with for the storm? Sound good? I've got a lovely walk for you with lots of water, because if there is one thing that's going to characterise March Madness, I think it's most definitely water. Right, let's do this. So why water? It's a good place to start. So with the pandemic, the action was based around Pluto, particularly, as the outer planet of interest between the signs of Capricorn, the tropical signs. So I will be using the tropical zodiac layered on top of, I guess, the geocentric movements of the planets. Going between the tropical signs of Capricorn and Aquarius. So this interplay between the structures, the institutions that hold up society, that govern society, and the collective. What the collective wants, where the direction the collective wants to go. So interesting, both Saturn-ruled signs, but one far more conservative and one more progressive, more collectivist, you might say. And that was the key dynamic of the pandemic years. And this transition to the end of Capricorn to the start of Aquarius was almost this shifting of power, literally Pluto, from these institutions which are now, you know, being revealed for what they are and are probably about to fail in fairly quick succession, fail and fall in fairly quick succession, for better or worse. And this shift of power towards groups, towards things which emerge from either bottom up or, I guess, horizontal networks, which can be nice things like community action groups, or it could be good old cults and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. That was the dynamic that we were sort of the archetypal dynamic that we were shifting through. Mosquitoes. What's this time? This time we're mainly focused around the next two signs, Pisces and Aries. And what that means is we're dealing with the end and the start of the tropical zodiac, the 0 point, which people would argue is the most significant, sensitive, transitory point where things end and where things begin. Spiderwebs this whole time. So Pisces is obviously mutable water, things moving very fast, lots of emotion, but the emotion washing over us. We can feel everything, but then it dissipates and leaves us, and we have this perspective without getting stuck or fixed in any particular experience. Then we have Aries, cardinal flyer. Just want to start finding the fire within, the creative initiating spirit within all of us to start things anew. It's a very volatile mix. You'll see there's not much sort of stability or grounding to this energy, but this is happening over the 0 point. In particular in Pisces, because in Pisces right now we have two very interesting figures. We have Neptune, the official outermost planet, if we believe, which we shouldn't, the astronomers. So the modern ruler of Pisces. So again, the modern ruler of Pisces, in Pisces, at the very end of Pisces, literally the last few degrees as we speak, which if we listen to the experts is the most volatile part of a sign, where we get it all but in a very sort of unstable and not entirely again stable manner. And as of January 11, about a week or so ago, you have the north node of the moon, the head of the celestial dragon, the devouring energy of the sky clock, this point of attraction, this hidden tractor beam which sort of sucks everything towards it, whether we realise it or not, because it is invisible. It's Rahu, as the ancient Vedics called it. We right now have that, has just entered the last sign, albeit the first sign because it goes the opposite direction around the sky clock. And so this period of March in particular is going to be characterised by the conjunction between Neptune and Rahu. Right at the end of tropical Pisces, the final degrees. So we've got peak Pisces. If we're going to sort of identify one theme, it's that, you know, we're getting the full dose of what it is, of what the Piscean archetype is, which for me is great because my ascendant is at 26 degrees Pisces. So I'm just sort of, this is why I'm doing these videos, because I'm going to be feeling it all. I understand the Piscean energy, I understand that late stage of the Piscean experience very well. I mean, to say I'm looking forward to it might sound a bit morbid, but no, I am, or I'm at least going to sort of make the most of it and try and help people through as much as I can. So that's it, peak Pisces, but there's also this idea of like, as the central archetype shifting from Pluto to Neptune. So what does that mean? What does it mean to, because they're both very slippery, sort of murky characters. That's probably one way to sort of find the overlap between Pluto and Neptune, but they are very different. Pluto works in a more intense, visceral, uncomfortable way, whereas Neptune, I'm not really sure what it's doing. It's like, is it there? What's it doing? It's elusive. Like it wants to sort of subvert conventional, mundane reality and take us away from that. So that can be good. It can be sort of, you know, enlightenment and fantasy, the idea of like transcendence. But it can also be, you know, just lies and deception and confusion and delusion. Just the dissolution of things, the removal or the slow breaking down of boundaries and distinctions. So this idea from, whereas the pandemic was characterised by intensity, now we have more ambiguity. fear is a Pluto thing, and fear was definitely a pandemic thing. And it's not that it won't be there, but now it's more confusion as opposed to just pure fear. And Pluto as transformation, the good old death and rebirth idea. Pluto being death as the idea of like a metaphorical death of something we hold dear, and having to start again, be reborn. I mean, that's obviously going to be a theme because we're at the sort of, the end and the beginning. And to sort of take away this sort of transition, the idea of transformation to transcendence. There's going to be a lot of themes, potentially people transcending, potentially literally, this sort of the earthly experience. And we'll get more about that theme as we go. And so what does the North Node do? I mean, it just turns everything up. So it is the point of attraction, and so it makes more of wherever it is. As I've sort of come to understand it, it's a similar influence of Jupiter, but without the benefic quality, either more neutral or even malefic, depending on how you want to understand it. So it will create more of this peak Pisces, peak Neptune experience. So let's just get a handle on that, on what peak Pisces is. The ending, the final sign, so endings. So leaving things behind, loss, dissolution, that's just, a logical way to interpret this. But, if we try to spin this, so we're going to try and spin all of these things, to their highest manifestation, the idea of like closure, finding closure in things. And that can be just a mental process rather than, the literal, physical ending of things. Because what will happen in the collective will happen. And, as much as we can follow along at home and get our heads around it, it will play out the way it will play out. I think the idea of having this timeline, this sort of calendar, allows us to, maintain some sort of objectivity or detachment from that broader collective process we're about to go through. So we're going to have, it's going to be emotional, highly emotional. Everything happening in Pisces, and it will be happening in tropical or sidereal Pisces. That will be the focal point. So, regardless of which zodiac you sort of follow, it's going to be Piscean. It's going to be amplified. It's going to be lots of emotion, but it's not going to be highly tangible, fixed emotion. We're not talking Scorpio sort of stuff here. Like a whole list of waves of emotion which will sort of crash over us, but then move on. And with the head of the dragon amplifying that, I imagine being feeling like we're lost at sea, lost in a sea, an ocean of all-encompassing emotion. So we need this grounding, need things, solid things to hold on to, and I think that's part of the preparation work that we can do will be really important. So good. We'll do the good first. The best of this period of peak Pisces. Imagination, creativity, inspiration. If you're going to create creative works, fictional works, written, visual, musical, there is no better time than this. We are planting the seeds of some of the most fertile, creative times, I think, of our lives right now. It could be beyond anyone's imagination, what Neptunian products will emerge from this period of time. novels, films, musical creations. So that's essentially where my focus mainly is, but particularly, you know, if the lights do go out and we're sort of doing whatever we're doing in the constraints that we have, you know, just have your creative projects, your sources of channeling your imagination right there, ready to go, and make the most of these times. Healing. What has the chaos of the last few years? So if we're going to sort of see this as the official transition away from the pandemic times, what do we need to heal from? Sorry. What is left from that 4-ish year period that we need to move on from? If you feel like you were right and other people were wrong, is this a final time to just let that go and not need to feel vindicated anymore? Those sort of questions we can be asking, but just in more general as well. Pisces, the 12th house, the 12th sign, is where we heal. It is often, you know, in places that are removed. No, but they're potent times for these sort of things. Let's just leave it at that. Faith as well. Finding faith in things. Or just peace. You know, linked to these ideas, you know. For the first time, maybe in a while, just feeling like we are at peace, or we're able to find peace in the world. So what is the context? You know, the potential more extreme manifestation in the world while we're trying to do these things. So ambiguity, confusion, things that are going to be highly confusing. Very little stable ground with which to sort of establish some sort of objective truth of what's going on from, I would imagine. Victimhood. That's definitely a Piscean, Neptunian thing. Be plenty of reasons to feel like people are being victimised. Many of them might be true, but there will still be a choice there about how much this is played into. So there will be a sort of a victimhood mentality, and that can be taken to certain extremes as well, so you're going to be aware of. Sickness, frailty, so mental and physical, and just like madness, the sense of like a delusion just descending upon the world, hence March Madness. You know, if there was a broader cosmic reason for the term March Madness being created, could well be the time that we're about to come into, I think. Spiderwebs everywhere. So I've never gotten to why March is so extreme. So obviously we've got the overlap of two, I guess, slow moving bodies, and that was the context of 2020 as well. You know, this sort of an emphasized period of time, because we have these two unions between planets which don't often meet. But also one of the key trigger factors, or what made 2020 both the start and the end so feeling like fated even, was the presence of eclipses. So as Neptune and Rahu are meeting, it will be in tropical Pisces season as well. So the sun will stroll in roughly 20th of February and join the party. So we've got peak Pisces during Pisces season as well. So fun. So when we have the sun with the nodes, it's eclipse season, because the best way to understand the lunar nodes is as the eclipse point. Or I should have said that. It indicates where the orbits, the ecliptics of the sun and the moon overlap, and so when they meet on a 2D level, they're also overlapping on 3D level, and so they can block each other out. Thinking of this from a heliocentric perspective. So we'll have eclipse season in March as we have this overlap, the amplification of Neptune in the final degrees of Pisces. The big boy, another one. I don't really like disturbing the spider webs. I mean, they're such immaculate creations, but the one that needs to do what it needs to do. Sorry, mate. Oh, they're everywhere. But try and stay on focus here. So the big boy, this eclipse season, total lunar, aka blood moon, eclipse on the 14th of March. That's when I think things could potentially really kick off. That's probably the main red flag day in terms of an actual apocalyptic style event happening. I'll get to why that date is so significant in our walkthrough, in our story time. But I think that's sort of the start of the period I'm calling the eye of the storm, which is the second half of March. So that's definitely one to start to get your head around now. Right. So where the sun goes, so too do Mercury and Venus, never far away, doing their very fun little dances together in the sky clock. Which way should we go? Go this way, maybe we can come back the other way. What's just obscenely ridiculous, and it's almost like we're being trolled. So we've got all these things, so, this whole Piscean sort of thing coming together. Mercury and Venus just happen to go into their retrograde cycles, which they do fairly frequently, particularly Mercury, at the exact same time, pretty much. So the entire Mercury retrograde, Venus will also be in retrograde, so it starts before Mercury and then finishes after. Synchronized. They both pass the sun, they're past the sun, they go into tropical Aries, and they station retrograde and go back from Aries into Pisces. And then they both station direct in Pisces and go back into Aries. So they do 3 passes of the 0 point. I mean, come on. So the dates, so Venus goes first, 2nd of March, basically right as we get stuck into March Madness, and then it turns direct again 12th of April, back in Pisces. And it does that, it basically goes direct, so it slows down, stations direct, and then starts to speed up again all around Saturn. So we get this whole month-long conjunction between Venus and Saturn in Pisces across end of March and then into April, which is could be its own breakdown in itself, what that means. I mean, there's just so many things going on, which is just seem very sort of, I don't know, say scripted, definitely synchronized, highly coincidental, we'll just put it at that. So this, I mean, there are some sort of stereotypical keywords or delineations of Mercury and Venus retrogrades that we can sort of go into. But the fact that it happens like during this period of time, across eclipse season, across the 0 point of the zodiac, the whole bunch of other stuff going on in Pisces, that this is significant. And so it's the application of these very extreme Piscean things onto the archetypes of Mercury and Venus. I mean, that's a very coherent, sound way to analyze what these retrogrades mean. And so if we take what we just said, we're going to see what will probably feel like the ending, the loss, the closure of Mercurial and Venusian themes in the collective. So what's Mercury? When we think of Mercury retrograde things, it's sort of usually travel and communication. So is it going to feel like there's literally an end or a loss of the ability to travel and to communicate in a collective sense the way that we have understood it? Potentially. I think that's a fairly reasonable way to sort of read these combinations. What's Venus? So obviously we think of, lovely things. Love, beauty, romance, luxury. But in a collective sense, finances, money. You can see why all the Q-tards are getting excited right now, can't you? Also, Venus is relationships, so it is the idea of like international relations and peace. And just to be aware that there is a chance that the expression of Venusian things at the international global level may feel like they're coming to an end. And this idea of endings and even the end times, again, I haven't even got to the most sort of like morbidly interesting part of the whole thing. We still have Saturn, just like we did in 2020. We have the Great Malefic, the adversary in the sky clock. As above, so below. We get involved as well. It's currently around mid-Pisces, just finished retrograde, so it's gaining speed. It's going to come and join the party, particularly end of March and into April. And so what's Saturn? It is Chronos in a mythological sense. So it is time, and so it is the end times. And so with Pisces and Neptune also being strongly linked to, to religion, this is in a metaphorical and in some ways probably sort of feel literal, like the end times. So let's just say what the sky clock is telling us. I think it's sort of hard to deny that. So, what is Saturn? What can we expect if it's going to come in and do that? Saturn is sort of cold and distant, grey. There's going to be a highly melancholic, depressive sort of feeling. It's going to be washing over everyone, I think. Melancholy is probably the higher manifestation of that sort of feeling, I think. So, what's your favourite sad music? What's your favourite sad movie? Might be a nice thing to rely on during these times. Okay, so now we get a bit more challenging. Things which are Neptunian are difficult to get a handle on. They can be sort of elusive, hidden, even, like invisible. And Saturn is adversary. It's that adversary. It's what feels like, it feels like it's the force that opposes humanity. the enemy of humanity. That's how we like to creatively describe it anyway. So put that together, we have the idea of hidden, of elusive or invisible enemies. And that can be similar themes to the pandemic, or it could be more human expressions of that theme. And that feeling of things which are out to get us, or out to get humanity, out to get what is good and sort of pure. Because remember, we've got Venus and Saturn as a very strong archetype throughout this whole thing. You know, what is pure and good versus what is sort of standing against that. There's going to be a lot of suspicion and a lot of paranoia going around, I think. And it could well feel like, you know, literally the spirit of the greatest adversary, Satan, is in the air. And so if you're religiously minded, you know, that's where you're going to turn. And so I guess, you know, it again pays to be aware that this is probably where things are going to go. And we know we can see it already, for sure. But I think we may be surprised by how much that sort of feeling starts to descend on the world. And we do have a few other factors as well which are going to play into that, if that wasn't already enough. There's still more, believe it or not. Not only do we have the actual planets that are around the 0 point, going through Pisces and Aries, all the other planets seem to be suspiciously orientated towards supporting this interesting energy. Let's start with the final inner personal planet of Mars. So Mars is, you know, the most un-Piscean planet, you might say, because it's not those Neptunian things. It likes to be in your face. It likes to be very bold and action orientated. It likes to assert itself. It likes to have its presence known, doesn't it? That's what a man does. Mars is the masculine spirit. The sort of useful masculine spirit. So where is Mars? Mars is in tropical Cancer, so a water sign. And Mars is in its fall in Cancer. So we have the Lesser Malefic in its sign of, in a sign of debilitation, where it doesn't act in the way it normally does. In Cancer, it acts in a way which is highly emotional. So again, we have more emotion. It's emotionally impulsive, I would say. Highly protective, overly protective. I've sort of put together this idea of like there being invisible enemies on one hand, and then, or like invisible, let's say, things which are on the outskirts of society, which are alienated from society, which are marginalised by society. Those figures who are rightly or wrongly seen as being enemies. And then we have this very overly protective energy of Mars, and Cancer is the home, it is the homeland. It is protecting the homeland. We start to see a bit of a flavour there, particularly as Mars shifts from retrograde to direct. So right now it is in retrograde, it's going backwards. And so we have Mars in Cancer forming a trine. So again, a very supportive, free-flowing energy from Mars. This overly protective, highly acting on emotion, acting based on how someone feels. It's irrational. It's not thinking straight. Particularly when we have Mercury in retrograde, it won't be thinking straight. Particularly when Mercury is in retrograde over Neptune, it will not be thinking straight. So we have lots of emotion, lots of free-flowing emotion. We have Mars suddenly slowing down, turning direct, gaining speed, gaining the capacity to act again, to assert itself, to be aggressive, to potentially be violent, all freely flowing to Pisces, to the 0 point, particularly as it gets closer to the end of Cancer and towards Leo, where it will go in mid-April. Idea of triangular aspects, so trines and sextiles being like good. This will be a very interesting time to challenge that sort of hypothesis. If you have an archetype which is not functioning well, and we have a lot of free-flowing supportive energy towards that archetype, is that good? And so that's one of the big question marks about this time, is when you have lots of, let's say, soft planets, so the Moon, Venus, Neptune, sort of in alignment with each other, they're getting lots of support from other planets, not just Mars in Cancer, but sextiles from Pluto at the start of tropical Aquarius, and then from Uranus at the end of tropical Taurus, so forming sextiles back to the 0 point. You have all this very strong energy all flowing back to the 0 point, to these planets at the zero point. Now imagine like this, it's like a vortex, it's like a whirlpool that's sort of being created. There's so much watery, emotional energy like being sucked into this one point on the zodiac, the most pivotal, crucial point. Like everything is acting, all the luminaries are acting as one to emphasize, to direct energy towards this point. Like, what does that look like? How do we even start to get our heads around that? And if we take into account that we have as well as those aspects, so we have a lack of balance in terms of geometry, like hard geometry. We don't have oppositions, we don't have squares, except, you know, very fleeting, caused by the moon or caused by sort of short transits, particularly by the sun. It's just all free-flowing and all moving and all, it's like uncontrolled, it's wild, it's like the waters of reality running wild and unconstrained. And so, like, where's the resistance? Where's the pushback? Where's the fight back? Where are the levees which sort of hold back the flood, that hold back the storm? There's nothing there. There's no earth energy. There's nothing in Capricorn. Nothing in Virgo, except the South Node, which is probably the worst planet you want to have in Virgo. And the only planet in Taurus, so the only planet, sort of physical planet we have in an Earth sign is Uranus, which is the most unstable planet. Come on, guys. And similar, so that's Taurus is the fixed sign. So we have the most unstable planet in the fixed Earth sign, in what should be the most stable planet. And then the other fixed signs, there's nothing going on there as well. Leo, nothing in Leo until Mars gets there in mid-April. But then Mars goes into Leo, and then as soon as it gets there, it opposes Pluto in Aquarius, so another fixed sign. So we have Pluto in the fixed air of Aquarius opposing Mars in the fixed fire of Leo, and that's the third and final of their oppositions that started in November, start of November, so which was in the lead up, the days before the US presidential election. So essentially at the end we come out of sort of March Madness and we come into this highly explosive, like, do or die opposition, this culmination of 6 months of like Mars Pluto oppositional energy coming out of all this murky, stormy sort of vortex energy that's been going on, and suddenly we're faced with this very explosive, fiery combination in fixed signs. How do we even put that together? I think so. So Mars, Mars is tricky because it's in its sign, its full sign, Cancer. It's freely flowing to this Piscean, Neptunian energy, and if we put those things together, it's the idea of the martyr. So Mars, Neptune, Mars and Pisces is, it goes about its process of, I guess, asserting itself, if you want to say, in highly, on one hand, in the good manifestation, it's highly sacrificial ways, so self-sacrificial, literally the martyr, that energy is going to be highly active, or it's war by deception. We know of that motto being used by certain agencies. So that is going to be a flavour of what's going on throughout March and April, and then Mars takes that energy and then comes into this opposition with Pluto, this final opposition. So I don't know, I don't even know how to try and pull that together apart from what I just sort of walked you through, but if we try and just bring that together, I think things are going to just move extremely quickly. There's going to be no like, there's nothing there holding things back, and so things just move quickly. Trines and sextiles are comfort zone, so people will just want to fall back to their comfort zone while things are moving very quickly, wanting to just let things happen. I see like lockdowns potentially, but involuntary, like voluntary lockdowns that we willingly go into rather than being forced into it by Capricornian structures. And just everything happening very quickly without resistance, and suddenly things are just fundamentally different. Things have ended and things have suddenly started anew. That's my best way to try and piece all this together. Right, so see what happens. So that's my best attempt to give you a general overview of what March Madness could look like. What a highly ambiguous, trying to bring some sort of clarity and meaning to what is going to be a highly confusing and ambiguous time. Because the one thing I didn't really mention throughout that whole thing, didn't really touch on Jupiter, which is the planet of meaning, of like clarity, of something being very able to process and make meaning of, and to see it as being orderly and coherent and part of a broader picture. Because Jupiter will be retrograde at the start of February, but then turn station direct, and so that's sort of a time when we can hopefully start to gain some sort of meaning. But it will still be in its sign of debilitation in Gemini. And while everything else is sort of, every other planet, even sort of Uranus and Pluto, they form sextiles to this 0 point, so we still get that free-flowing, intense energy from Pluto and this sort of rebellious, revolutionary, liberating feeling from Uranus. Jupiter's sort of stuck in the middle of Gemini, not really aspecting anything. In fact, for the majority of this time, it is unaspected in terms of the traditional sort of Ptolemaic aspects. And so you'll see when we get into the charts, lots of everything else is sort of in the picture except for Jupiter, which sort of just sits there for a large part of particularly March, just not really doing anything. So symbolically, it's like there is no ability to understand what's going on, to see the broader picture, to have some sense of like clarity of where we are in the broader scheme of things. So that's why I came up with the idea of this sort of March Madness calendar, to provide that source of the broader picture, to something that is fixed and earthy and grounded and somewhat Jupiterian and wholesome and uplifting, and sort of reminds us that we are on this process is leading us somewhere, whether we sort of realise it or not at the time. And my idea for this came from my study of the astrology of the pandemic, 2020, and also the start of 2021. I've done a lot of writing about this and also a few videos, which you're welcome to have a look at. You can see very clearly that the movement of the planets, both in terms of like how they time significant events, but also the symbology, the deep symbology of the planets and how they are reflected in the events that have transpired. And so I want to now just give you an overview, show you why we can take seriously this idea of like preparing for March Madness in a very specific way. So let's start with December 26th, Boxing Day. We had a annular solar eclipse. So 2019, the week before the year of clear vision starts, had an annular eclipse conjunct Jupiter. So what's an annular eclipse? It is when the moon blocks out the sun, but not fully, because of its orbit. It's smaller, I guess, and so it's called a ring of fire eclipse, untechnically, because it sort of doesn't fully block out the sun. If you think about what a ring of fire is, in a very practical sense, it is a corona. So the idea of a annular eclipse is the creation of a corona, and we had this corona eclipse conjunct Jupiter. And Jupiter, again, as you said, it is a planet which sort of gives something a very specific, like a very clear meaning, like brings out that archetype of what it is and makes it bigger and makes it more easier to see. So we have a annular solar eclipse in the last week of 2019 as we move into 2020. The sun is coronated, you might say, and it travels on. This moves into Capricorn, and as Saturn and Pluto conjunct, so there is that conjunction on the day of January 12th. There's the same day when the coronated Sun joins them. So we have a triple conjunction for the Great Conjunction. Saturn and Pluto joined by the Sun, coming off this angular ring of fire corona eclipse. And if we look back at what happened during those times, the 26th was within 24 hours of the initial sequencing in some dodgy Wuhan lab, I assume, of the Rona. So we'll just call it the Rona, shall we? Slightly auspicious timing. So we didn't know it at the time, that's the thing. So will these events that happen in March, will we sort of know that they're happening? So do we know at the time that they're aligning with what's going on in the strike lock? As above, so below. It's a good question. Or will we have to sort of see it all in retrospect? So that's one thing to keep in mind. But then if we get to January 12th, when we have the official, unveiling or the transfer of the corona to these two highly shady, death-like figures in the sky, that was the day that the sequence was first published in the NHS, whatever, public records. So it was sort of the day that the corona was made official or released onto the world. And that was also the day that the first case of the Rona was recorded outside of China. Very auspicious. Auspicious. Inauspicious. Suspicious timing. So then we have the conjunction, and what happens then is Saturn moves on from Pluto, then Jupiter comes in from behind, and Jupiter starts to move closer to Pluto. So we have again Jupiter enlarging this feeling of plutonic feeling of something that's sort of under the surface coming up, all this like this sort of suppressed feelings, fear, panic, terror and death. Jupiter just makes it larger, and so it sort of gradually grows throughout sort of January, February and March. It gets closer to Pluto. Then Saturn moves on, gets closer to the first degree of Aquarius. Then Mars, the lesser malefic, just comes roaring through from behind, hits Jupiter, hits Pluto, and then last day of March, basically as Jupiter has formed its conjunction with Pluto, Mars comes in and forms a conjunction, a double malefic conjunction with Saturn on the first degree of Aquarius, so the collective. So we have the restrictive force of, so we have Jupiter and Pluto, this idea, this like amplification of fear, of panic, of, that death is in the air. Then we have Saturn, this sort of restrictive adversarial force, the ruling planet of both Capricorn and Aquarius. So it's doing its thing, it's very strong. So this adversarial, restricting, disciplining, top-down force is empowered, emboldened, and then hit by Mars. Aggressiveness, the ability to act and to enact things. And what happens in the 31st of March, we essentially have lockdowns, let's call them aggressive restrictions to the collective, to the Aquarian collective, descend across the world. And on that day, we have basically on the day, or on these final days of March, we have all this sort of bollocks from these Capricornian institutions around the world, enforcing, releasing their agendas onto the world, building back better. Pandemic has barely begun, and already we're planning to overcome it in solidarity into a brave new world. So it's there in the timing, but it's there in the symbolism both of the planets, and I think it's fair to say the tropical signs as well. If we want to look for it, if we want to see it. As above, so below. If we then skip forward, Mars moves on, and Mars, towards the end of the year, will get to a point where it starts to square Jupiter and Saturn. So we get this now aggressive energy starting to test. It's its first sort of testing period of this Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn three-way conjunction that's going on still across Capricorn and Aquarius. Jupiter moves on from Pluto. Saturn goes into Aquarius, retrogrades, comes back. And on the day of the summer solstice, 21st of December, they make their conjunction, another great conjunction, you might call it. No, the expanding force and the restricting force. It sort of sets the tone, sets the parameters for society in their cycle that they go through. Since the start of the cycle, in this new highly Capricornian / Aquarian transitionary period, intensified by Pluto, now sort of like initiated in a new way right on the summer equinox. So the sun at the first degree of Capricorn. But a week before that, on the 14th, we have another solar eclipse, of course. And what happens on the 14th? What happens on the 14th of December? We have the first jibby jab, we'll call it the jibby jab, administered in America, in the United States, right on the day of the solar eclipse. So his idea was that. And what's very interesting at this time, so we have Mars moving on to a square, but right there, parked in Taurus, so the sort of the square sign to Aquarius is Uranus. And what's Uranus? It's Prometheus, the spirit which wants to liberate humanity from its shackles. Aquarius is many things. Say it's one of them is, or two of them are technology and transhumanism. And so we have this great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, the same degree that Saturn and Mars met when the lockdowns descended. And now we have a new test, a new challenge given to Aquarian society, now in the flavour of a square to Uranus. Just so happens to be when a series of rushed, highly suspect experimental injections are unleashed onto the world. th, the eclipse, first jibby jab is administered, and we go back to the 21st, is the day that the president-elect, the resident-in-chief in waiting, Sleepy Joe, receives his jibby jab in front of the press and the cameras and the world at large, the Aquarian society at large. Exact day of the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in a square to Uranus. And if we fast forward a month, so we go to the first official day of Sleepy Joe's reign of terribleness. Really should actually look at the chart for the 21st, it's insane. It's literally just one big square in the sky. how any astrologer could look at that chart for the 21st of January 2021 and think that anything good would come of anything that happened. That there was benefic, unmalevolent intent behind whatever was going on that day is proof that astrology is fundamentally shaped by human bias, I'd say. So you can see the chart. Still Jupiter and Saturn pretty close to each other, now in a very tight square to Uranus. Again, technology, this spirit of humanity wanting to liberate itself from its biological constraints. And then on that day of the 21st, Mars joins Uranus, and so does the Moon. So this big juicy square between Aquarius and Taurus going on, and that's literally all that's going on in the sky is this big square. And what happens that day? Sleepy Joe, or the whatever he is, a hologram clone thingy, demonic entity, comes in and signs just a bunch of executive orders, all these crazy sort of like jibby jab pandemic themes to just move that whole agenda forward in an insanely sort of like accelerated manner. You can see it, you can see the intent, we can see the archetypal energy behind that day, what was being unleashed, what was being where the Aquarian society was being directed on that day. It's there in the sky for anyone who wants to see. And when I was putting this all together, like how if you were a clear-eyed astrologer at that time, how invaluable the luminaries would have been for you to understand what was going on and what was about to happen. And that's why I think we can do that again. We can use that, keeping that in mind, that we have the preview across 2020 and the start of 2021. We can now apply that same sort of framework or that same theory to what's about to come in March, before and after. Cool. Let's do it. Might get a storm here shortly as well. Looking a bit ominous. So, everything I'm about to run you through now is contained in more detail in my official Wholesome Astrology March Madness calendar. Please go and download it for free. You are of course welcome to sign up to my Substack and choose any subscription option that you would like, but this is not about that really. Piscean is the Pisces energy, again, where I have my ascendant just smack bang in the middle of all this shit that's going to be going on. It is about doing what is right, doing what is helpful, what is able to nurture and guide. Pisces are the sort of the way showers of the zodiac. So that's what I want to do. I'm in a position to sort of really piece this all together and do it in a very sort of hopefully playful and wholesome way. So please go and download that. You can walk you through all the stuff I've just talked about, and then chart by chart from the start of February to the end of April. You can follow the story, you can take your own notes at home and play along, and if all does go to shit, at least you've got some sort of something to give you a bit of light in the dark, hopefully. So, we'll start with February 1st. The calm before the storm.
The calm before the storm.
If you look at the chart, you'll start to see this dynamic I mentioned about from like soft planets and soft aspects being the dominant theme. The 1st of February, we have a quadruple conjunction between the Moon and Venus, which will both be on top of this Neptune North Node Rahu conjunction. So we get this early taste of what this very soft, very free-flowing, this sort of lack of what it is to have a lack of hardness or a lack of resistance in the world. We get this preview on the 1st of February. Hope that gives us a sort of a sense about what's to come. You know, like a vibe check. Will happen, and this will be the conjunction. We get almost this repeat of this conjunction that comes in the eye of the storm, as I'll call it, at the end of March, basically the day before, I think, the solar eclipse. So we have sort of like a 2-month lead up to when we get this conjunction again, essentially. Start to see things taking shape. On the 4th, this is when we get, I'd call it the best of Jupiter. And we didn't make the most of Jupiter around this time. So Jupiter stations direct, so it's been in retrograde up until now, this whole time. Stations direct innate is at trine to Mercury, with the Sun also there as well. So Mercury with Jupiter is clarity of mind, clarity of vision, like a sound mind, really to see things clearly, to take in information in a logical, consistent, rational manner, to process it and to derive the meaning out of that. But everything that's happening at this time is still in the context of emotion. So I think what we're doing at this time, because this also corresponds with the Moon, so we're tracking the Moon will square Pluto. So there's going to be this clarity of mind combined with an emotional intensity. So what we're doing on this day is we're learning, we're practicing, we're getting used to deriving meaning from our own emotions, from how we're feeling. So we're sort of trusting how we're feeling. And if all this shit's going on in the world at this time, we have really bad information, you know, overly exaggerated Jupiter in Gemini information coming through, we just can't trust it. There'll be too much, or it'll be too distorted or confusing or deceptive or like overwhelming for us to process it and derive meaning. So where do we turn? Inside. The whole, we're making our own, I guess, Jupiterian energy through our ability to process. You know, the Moon is emotions, it is the body, it is how the body interacts with our sort of social and physical environment, and it receives these feelings, these emotions, and we try and process them and understand them. And that's going to be, those emotions are going to be very intense, and there's going to be lots of them. It's going to be free-flowing and overwhelming, but we have to do our best to stay guided by how we are feeling and trusting how we feel, trusting our emotional responses to things, and to be guided by that. And so we're getting this chance to practice this now, to start to go through that process. There's a song which I really like by Aurora, the singer, the Scandinavian singer, which is about finding knowing through our emotions. Sometimes all that we can know, what sort of leads us through the dark, is our emotional response to things, and to trust that, which is what the water signs do well, is to be able to, particularly Pisces, to not be overwhelmed by our emotions, but actually process them and take what is needed. So that's what we have. And you know, Jupiter sort of does a few things, but there's not much of it, especially during the March. So that's that's our lesson for now as we get into the thick of things anyway.
I don't know why, but I feel down. You need to know I can't go on. I was a rose, I was an animal. Don't let me change, don't let me go. All around is stone, all is soft inside. All that I know lies within emotion, words remain unspoken. Lead me through the dark. All that I see came to me in colors, lasted for a moment. Lead me through the dark. All that I know, all I
So we've moved on to second week of February. By this point, Mars has gone back, retrograded back to the point where it's now trining Saturn. So how can we make the most of this Mars-Saturn free-flowing energy? So it's going to be present, you know, for the next month as sort of Saturn sort of slowly moves forward, and then Mars goes back, stations direct, and starts to move forward as well. So one of the most supportive energies we have is this Mars-Saturn trine. When it first goes exact on the 9th, we also have the Mercury cazimi when it goes exact with the Sun. So again, we have this, hopefully this ability to, another sense of ability to sort of like think relatively clearly. Because I guess when we have a cazimi, the Sun sort of puts a spotlight or a highlight onto whatever planet that is, and Mercury is the mind. These sort of logical faculties. So we have that with the trine between Mars and Saturn. But we also have the Sun and Mercury trining, so square to Uranus. So, you know, that's a very impulsive, you know, spontaneous, we want to do stuff, and we're going to feel, so we're preparing to go to we're preparing for emotional battle, emotional warfare. So we're doing what we need to do to sort of like, you know, gird our loins, but in an emotional sense. Uranus gives us that sort of, that jump start, I guess you might call it. So then we get more Uranus energy when the moon moves on from Mars. We get a full moon, so we get a sort of a Aquarius season full moon. Aquarius has been the modern ruler Uranus, and the full moon will be squaring Uranus. So we've got a T-square between the Sun, Moon, and Uranus. So highly impulsive. So this is our first sort of test. This Mars-Saturn tests the ability to... Mars-Saturn can be like caution in the face of danger. So seeing a danger, seeing something which is a threat, and taking the appropriate action. It's probably a good way to... And then like, you know, calling on things like stamina and endurance to get through something. So putting that together, we sort of get this test. It's like, it could be very impulsive you know, like shocking sudden things happening across this time, starting to build into this sort of theme. But we're testing ourselves. Can we resist that Uranian energy to just like leap into something? So that then let's move into the second half of February. Moon moves on, forms this very nice, look at that chart, lovely. Get this grand Moon, Mars, Saturn, Water, grand trine. So Moon being in Scorpio at this time. So the emotions are building. I see this as like the first wave, a warning wave coming through. So again, a bit of a preview about what these very intense water energies are going to feel like. Sort of big wave washing over us. Because it is, you know, even though Mars and Saturn are in a trine, this is going to be a double malefic grand trine in water. That is the day also that the sun went into Pisces, so we're now officially in Pisces season, so 19th, 20th of Feb. So, you know, this is sort of, we're getting closer to peak Pisces now. So we get this grand water trine, Moon, emotional planet, with the two malefics as the sun enters Pisces. Start to see things are starting to really build up in this general theme that we have going on here. The Moon moves on into a opposition with Jupiter in a square, so a T square to Mercury. So Mercury's moved on from that trine to the square now. So T squares, we find release or an outlet through the apex planet, which in this sense is Mercury in Pisces. So right now I'd say there's a lot, you know, Jupiter in Gemini starting to really build up. So there's lots of information, lots of highly exaggerated information. Again, everything is Piscean, very murky, very ambiguous. Mercury in Pisces is like, okay, I need to just let go of knowing. Can we release the need to actually know what's going on in the world? Whether you voluntarily sort of shut off from certain sort of Gemini news sources, Jupiter and Gemini, the things we sort of thought we could trust, those news sources, those sort of like figureheads, those gurus of the media, of information we thought we could trust. Is this the time when we actually turn off and release the need to know what is going on in the world and start to, as I said, fall back to our own internal experience and these, you know, these sort of Neptunian things which we know we're going to rely on during this time? Is this the sort of time when we start to move in that direction? Yeah, that's one thing to sort of keep in mind. Okay, February 24th. The last week now, February, Mars stations direct. So stations, take to your battle stations. Things are about to get real. Emotional battle stations. Get ready. Because Mars is still trying to Saturn, but as it stations direct, the Moon moves into an exact opposition. So it's like polarized in this Mars energy. So we get this sort of vivid sense of what Mars now direct in Cancer is going to be. You know, so the overprotectiveness, the emotional reactivity is going to start to build up now and really start to take pace as Mars gains pace and moves back through Cancer towards Leo. So everything, you know, every action that was sort of being frustrated or held back in Mars retrograde now can move forward. And that can be good or bad. You know, whether that action is conscious or unconscious, it's going to be able to do more and have more effect in the world. And again, we're imagining what Mars is Mars in Cancer in full, flowing back to this highly Piscean, Neptunian energy. So that's going to just be getting more and more strong in the world. The natives are going to become more and more restless. That's one way to put it as well. Then the Moon moves on. Moon conjuncts Pluto. It's the same day that Mercury conjuncts Saturn. So we get this sort of Mercury Saturn is like a very disciplined mind. Very sort of, it could be like a sort of cold, detached mind. even though or detached, particularly in Pisces. So we're going to get a sense of, we're going to get a clear ability to sort of hopefully grasp, what the Saturnian force is doing. If we twist that to its highest form, it is discipline. So we sort of go into a new depth of finding that new depth of emotional discipline now, or mental and emotional discipline. Whatever that means in our own lives is up to us. But yeah, things should be getting very real at this stage. Okay, the last major thing we have in February is a new moon, Pisces new moon. New moons start of the lunar cycle. It's what we sort of plant a seed. That's sort of how it's we best way to understand it. So we're planting a seed of what our highest manifestation of the Pisces energy is for this period of time. So whatever creative Neptunian endeavour we would like to do across this period, maybe the new moon is when we really start to initiate that. It could just be finding compassion, so am I just going to, adopt a position of compassion to whatever's going on in the world and the people around me, whatever they choose to be doing at this time. Or just, find some water. Go and sit by the ocean, stare at the sea if you have access to it. Have a nice bath. Sometimes we can be very, just if in doubt, be very practical and literal with these energies, I think. Alright, so we're in March. Let the madness begin. So I'll show you the chart here for literally midnight March. So we're going, I should say we're doing Moonchild standard time here, which if you don't know is New York City time. You literally, so this is, midnight, 1st of March, March Madness begins, and we see the chart. Moon has moved on, and the moon is back to where it was at the start of February. So 28 days later. So it's hitting this conjunction again with Neptune and Rahu. Now, where are they? Basically 27 and 28 degrees. So Neptune's basically in the last degree of Pisces now. And the moon sort of comes in and hits it. So this, but now it's Mercury there. So we have Mercury there instead of Venus. So Mercury is on Neptune. So it's this like fog of mind. So Neptune can be highly, highly inspirational, it's like the inspirational speaker, highly imaginative mind. But in Pisces, with all this sort of going on, like Mercury doesn't really do well in Pisces in a sort of traditional sense. That it is a highly foggy mind, a highly susceptible mind, highly susceptible to delusions and deceptions and fictions. The moon comes in and amplifies that even more with the North Node still there as well. What happens at the same time on this day, not just that, with the Sun square Jupiter. Sun square Jupiter is just, everything is larger than life, like, exaggerated, and we'll have leaders in the world, these solar figures, saying very outrageous, bold, exaggerated things, everyone, these people, they'll be assuming this guru sort of vibe, believing they have the answers, believing they are the messianic figures to see us through these end times. And on that same day we have Venus in Aries stationing retrograde. So now the retrograde, this going back, getting sucked back in to the whirlpool, begins with Venus. This is all on the first day. All this is happening on the first day of March at midnight. So literally at midnight, Venus will be stationed retrograde. Sun will be moving into this conjunction with Jupiter, and the moon will be passing over Neptune and Mercury. We go forward, basically, to the final hours of March the 1st, Moonchild time. The moon moves from the Mercury, Neptune to Venus. So we go from confusion delusion. That's probably the better way. Confusion, probably the better way to describe Mercury, Neptune, and then delusion, that sort of delusional energy more with Venus, who always wants to see the best of something. Still with the with the Sun now closer to square with Jupiter, and Mercury now basically where is it? Almost exactly conjunct Neptune now. So you can see that whole day across the first, we're in the thick of it. The madness, this sort of these clouds or this fog of delusion has descended. It's sort of everywhere in the world. I would imagine we're prepared, so it's okay. So Moon moves on, getting stuck into its second cycle, its proper peak March Madness cycle now, and things are starting to heat up in the sense that a very watery, messy shit show can heat up. So now we have a Sun-Mars trine. So the Sun comes in Pisces, trining Mars, now direct. Oops, Sun's out. Trining Mars direct in Cancer, like a storm surge. The sort of boost of fire in the belly between Pisces and Cancer. Again, I'm sort of thinking like, not sure these good aspects are actually good at this point, but we'll see. And again, as that trine happens, the Moon is on Mars, so the Moon sort of emphasizing this Mars in Cancer direct energy, given a bit of heat and radiance by the Sun. So now Sun's getting close to Saturn now. If we go forward a few days to March 12th, we get that Sun-Saturn conjunction, still in a somewhat trine to Mars. Sorry. Yeah, still close, but not quite as strong. But now if you look at the chart for this, I've left out, so I'm just doing the traditional aspects here. So I'm leaving out sort of like quincunxes and stuff, because I think it's helpful to just see this through the basics, through the basic aspects and the basic planets here, and just to see the configurations that they're making. We can see now it's all blue, so it's all soft aspects. So there's no balance, there's no archetypal balance in the sky at the moment. Things can be happening very, very, very quickly without pushback, without resistance, with the only real resistance being this sort of Mars in Cancer quality that we've talked about. So it's what we might sort of get the sense about is resistance feels futile. It's what can we even do about it? I think this is when it's resorting to our comfort zones and this potential voluntary lockdown sort of thing. Again, just me trying to piece things together. Who knows? That's how I'm sort of seeing these things. Particularly when we get the Sun over Saturn, it's oh, so now we can see Saturn very clearly. Put a spotlight on it. Saturn in Pisces. It's do I really want to sort of be outside? Do I really want to sort of be in the storm at the moment? I'm not sure. So all this sort of going on, it's I guess with Sun on Saturn, in some sense we will see the actual reality of the situation, because Saturn is in a sense reality. It is it doesn't allow us to escape what is actually going on, whether we like it or not. So we see reality, but it's reality is gone wild. It's the waters of reality running wild. Because we also have Mercury on Venus at this time as well, just at that time. So we have these sort of dual conjunctions going on. Yeah, who knows? Okay, and then we hit the lunar eclipse. Calling this the blood Moonchild eclipse. Why? Firstly, if you haven't already, if you're fairly new here, highly suggest in part of your Piscean preparation for March Madness, you can go and watch my Orange Moonchild series. I think it'll be highly valuable background work to understand what might be about to happen across this period. It's very fun. Me and a friend put a lot of effort to make it entertaining as well as informative. It's like almost 3 hours of conspiratorial astrology about the Moonchild, recently inaugurated as the Emperor of the United States and Canada and Greenland and then the realm, one assumes. Assuming he survives the blood Moonchild eclipse on March 14th. So the moon will be opposite. We'll go opposite this whole sort of Piscean 0 point shit show that's going on. So it'll be exactly conjunct this, well not exactly, but close to conjunct the South Node. The South Node is about past, about sort of karmic reasons why we came in. So things we've done in past lives, if you believe in that, which we're now moving away from to something else towards the North Node, the head of the dragon. So there's always sort of like, when we have a South Node eclipse, there's this side of like fated in the sense of things from the past being left behind or jobs being done and moving away from that. So the eclipse opposition will be trine. So the moon will be trine Uranus. And the sun will still be conjunct Saturn. So they're the two planets really being activated by the eclipse. A few things to sort of note. So firstly, we know that the Moonchild was born on a blood moon, lunar eclipse himself. So any time these things come up, they're especially important for him. Uranus will be right on his midheaven again, so very close to the point it was, close to Algol when he received the non-fatal head wound. So it's gone past it. It retrograded back over Algol, and that's when we had the failed assassination attempts. And now it's back there again for the final time. Getting all this again, very free-flowing trine energy from a eclipsed moon, South Node, which is again, his moon was born on a South Node eclipse with his sun conjunct the North Node. But his sun was 23 Gemini, and so this full moon opposition will pretty much exactly square his natal eclipse. So basically, it's forming a grand cross in the sky. At the same time that it's putting all its energy towards Uranus, right at the top of his chart. Plus with Mercury stationed direct as well. So Mercury is Mercury is things to do with travel and communication going wrong. So basically the exact day of the lunar eclipse, all the things are happening, and then Mercury goes retrograde. So now we have Venus and Mercury both in retrograde. So I've made this offer a few times, the Moonchild, if he wants a personal astrologer. I assume he has one, but if not, the offer's still there. But I'd be avoiding any plane trips around this time, essentially for the whole of March Madness. Would be my recommendation to the orange one, the chosen tangerine. The orange jihadi, apparently, now. Let's see what happens. Okay, so now we're in the thick of it. I feel like this is where things start to move. Regardless of what happens with the eclipse, with any orange or otherwise individuals, things are really getting crazy now. So we have Venus and Mercury both in retrograde, going back, getting sucked back towards the 0 point. So it's like this is like getting sucked back into the whirlpool about what's going on. I think this is when we are most sort of challenged in terms of these Mercury and Venusian things in the world, and the potential for when these things can really sort of start to go south, so to speak. So I guess straight after we have the eclipse, the moon then goes on and makes an opposition to Mercury and Venus in retrograde. So we get this sort of real sort of exaggerated sense about what the retrogrades are, and they'll only sort of get more. Then they'll start to sort of unfold across the second half. Of March. The moon then moves on. We'll make it square to Pluto. Of course, when it does these squares, it's in Scorpio. So every time it comes in and hits its sort of opening square to Pluto, it's in its sign of debilitation in Scorpio. And on this day, so we're up to the 17th now. When it squares Pluto, the Sun will be right on the North Node. Again, this sort of second half of March, I'm not really sort of sure how to really describe it, but let's just sort of go through some of the key sort of conjunctions so we have some sort of timeline. Anyway, so the moon moves on, and the Sun. So we're on the 19th, so the final day of Pisces season. So the moon is on the 29th degree of Pisces, exactly conjunct Neptune on the 29th degree of Pisces. So the anaretic degree, the sort of fated, the volatile, the extreme degree of the tropical sign of the zodiac, of the whole zodiac. Neptune, modern ruler of Pisces, the planet which dissolves, which breaks down, which allows an escape from the world. The Sun passes over it. Then the moon makes an exact trine again at 29 degrees Scorpio. You can see the chart here, and you can see again all that energy just flowing back to the 0 point of the zodiac. It's just, yeah, again, who knows what's going on. 24th, what happens? So we get another Cazimi, Mercury Cazimi, conjuncts the Sun. What does that mean? Now that day, moon conjuncts Pluto. And now you can sort of see in this chart, it's very obvious now that it's like just everything is almost exactly flowing back. All this energy is just being channeled back to the 0 point, and that's where everything is happening. All the attention is there. And similar, we get to the 28th, moon moves on from Pluto and gets to the 0 point. So the end of the second lunar cycle. We're back to where we started sort of 2 months ago, and Venus is back there now as well, but this time it's at 29 degrees. So we sort of shifted that initial conjunction we had on the 1st of February, and now it's happening again. And look at it, moon, Venus, Neptune, 29th degree, North Node Rahu still within a few degrees, Saturn getting closer, Mercury just over the edge, still basically 1 degree away from the whole thing. Like, who knows? So I'm calling this the eye of the storm. And then basically later that day, 24 hours later, the moon moves on, hits the sun, we get a partial solar eclipse in Aries. I think we sort of, in some way, this is it. So let's call it the end times eclipse, maybe something like that. But I think that's when now we sort of come out. We start to at least come out the other side. I'm not saying things sort of get better, but at least there's things are moving in some sort of different direction. Hopefully. So what happens then? Let's think positively. So let's say from this point on that the tide is turning. Things are moving in a different direction, or even there's resistance, or there's a shift, some sort of sense of a shifting of the current in a different direction, even just against the flow of where things have been going. So the moon moves towards the end of Aries, forms a square to Mars. So again, the moon and the sun and Mars and sun and the moon in a square. At least hopefully there's a bit of activation, something sort of like a spark of something, a bit of courage, a bit of like willpower comes to sort of fight against the currents of what's going on. Maybe that might be a good way to put it. And Neptune, so Neptune's finally sort of into Aries. So there's hopefully that sort of, hopefully we get, if we sort of take tropical for what it is, we get this vibe shift. It might not be good, but at least it's a vibe shift. At least things are sort of moving away from this peak Pisces sort of thing, hopefully. Moon moves on, hits Uranus. Bit of, feeling of like rebellion maybe. Like want to actually do stuff, fight back a bit, do a bit of an uprising, maybe. Who knows? But we still got all these we still got all the soft aspects. But now we actually have the sun has moved on to sextile to Jupiter. So Jupiter is hopefully coming back into the picture again. And we get to the guarding, have some sort of something to hold on to, hopefully. One can only hope. Then on the 5th of August, 5th of August, 5th of April, moon makes its sort of third conjunction with Mars, so we're going to flowing back. But now we have the sextile between the sun and Jupiter goes exact, Sun Jupiter. So I'm like, no, maybe we actually get a sort of a ray of light appearing, coming through the clouds. This sort of sense of hope and optimism returns about where we're going and what the meaning of all this shit show was. Hopefully, because Mercury is still sort of right on the, we still have Venus and Mercury retrograde and sort of, but at least we're looking for this sort of tone shift, or we're looking for the positives, the silver linings. Hopefully we can see silver linings starting to return. And the moon moves on, actually forms a sort of a minor grand trine to the sun and Jupiter on the day that Mercury stations direct. So is this when the clouds start to clear? Do we actually start to get some proper clarity about what's going on? Now, sort of, less fog with Mercury sort of getting out of its retrograde cycle. Let's hope so, anyway. So hopefully what we start to get now is a bit of resistance, a bit of some more tension, a rebalancing of things. So the moon moves on and hits the south node, and so forms an opposition to the 0 point, everything that's going on there. So we have Mercury now direct over the north node. But Mars is now starting to play more of an active role, and so you can start to see there's a bit of tension, there's a bit of red, which you normally wouldn't think is good, but in this sense hopefully it is. So Mars is sort of starting to creep up towards this opposition with Pluto, but also the square to the sun, and this sort of starts to grow. Then we get a full moon. This time the moon is in Libra, so it's the scales, so it's balance. So there's balance, you get this balance returning finally. sense of balance, both like feeling us but also in the sky as well. Things are starting to feel like they're more balanced. If you look at sort of like natal charts, what a balanced chart is, you want that sort of harmony between hard aspects and soft aspects of, you know, benefic and malefic planets. So we're starting to get that now, which is good. And the fact that we have this full moon in Libra, and on this day, so April 12th, Venus also stations direct as well. So this is like Venus coming back into it. You know, the ruler of Libra, where the full moon is, coming back into direct motion. So the balance is there. This is the day when we do sort of, we're fighting for balance, or fighting to regain our sense of balance. So it's good, it's good things happening. 15th, I think this is sort of the final, it's called the final throes of the storm that we're having now. We'll look at the chart for this one. So we have Mercury, 29 degrees Pisces, Mars, 29 degrees Cancer, and the Moon, 29 degrees Scorpio. So we have a anaretic grand water trine. But all planets are direct now, which is interesting. So now it's all systems go, hopefully moving forward in a forward direction from where we were, from that murkiness of where we were, that madness of where we were. Again, is it good? I don't know. Does it feel good? I don't know. But it's different, hopefully. But this is it. This is the final sort of, the final wave, the final sort of, the storm chucking its final thing at us with this anaretic grand water trine. And then we're through it, or something. We have a new dynamic, a new sort of fiery dynamic that comes in, I'd say. So Sun is in Taurus now. So again, at least we have fixed Earth energy, much needed fixed Earth energy coming in at this point. Mars is in Leo. Again, fixed fire. And the Moon hits Pluto. So the Moon is in fixed air. So we have a T-square between Mars, Sun in Taurus, Mars in Leo, and Moon, Pluto in Aquarius. A fire starts to burn. So the fire, we're going from water to fire now. It's a new dynamic. It feels different. Is it literal fires? Again, who knows? Fireworks? Not sure. Moon moves on, and now Moon is about to finish its third cycle. So it comes into Pisces, hits Saturn, taking on all this like earthy but still cardinal energy now with things in Aries, initiating something. Things are initiating, we are initiating something new. Bit of fire in the belly, initiating what is a new reality. Moon, Saturn, reality. What is the reality moving forward? And then to finish things off, a new moon. Moon hits Sun, Sun in Taurus, square the opposition between Mars and Pluto. Let the flames begin, from water to fire. And that's where we're headed. Again, I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's positive, I'm saying we're out of the storm. Do we go back there to some extent? Obviously Neptune and Saturn both will retrograde back into Pisces in the end of 2025, but it's not the same. We're not getting this overlap of other energies in Pisces as well. So there's some revisiting, but we're not back there. Things are different. And I'm not saying, again, I don't know. What are they? How are they different? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it explosions and fireworks and the worst things we can think of with Mars opposite Pluto, with this 6 months of tension building up from when they first opposed each other? Who knows? But it's new And whatever it is, we're prepared for it. And we have prepared for it. Okay. If that's helpful, guys, please go and download your free PDF March Madness calendar. Subscribe to my Substack if you would like. Give me a like, give me a subscribe on here as well. And I'll see you soon. I'm sure this won't be the last video I do about March Madness, but I think this is the best guide that I'll have to give you about what is something that's going to be very personal for me as well with my ascendant at 26 degrees Pisces. So hope that helps. Alright, I'm going to go find a water body to jump into. See you guys.
Riders on the storm, riders on the storm. Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown. Like a dog without a bone, an actor out on loan. Riders on the storm.
Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
What's the storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.